Hi guys, we're back. Hope you didn't miss me too much. I know you've been going, where is he? Where is he? Uh, we're, we're back. This one will not be as somber and sorrowful and meaningful, and I'm doing the thing with my hair again. Look at that. Look at that. Always something when I'm filming, right? Um, and I could stop and fix it, but I'm just too lazy. Um, this was only as sad and weepy as the last one. I just wanted to get a point across last time, and that's going to bug me, isn't it? So, anyway, I'm going to leave it alone. I promise, I am. Um, this one's a little bit more fun, a little bit more funny, I think, a little bit as well when you start looking at some of the things we're talking about. Once again, let me just go ahead and add this one. I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate all the sharing. Uh, I do think that's important. I've sort of been, saying, hey, look, if you don't want to understand, and that's cool. If you don't want to, I do understand. I really do. I don't want to be that guy that, well, if you love Jesus, you would share this. I do ask, though, that you do consider the value of this. If you agree with these messages, that you consider that maybe you are part of something bigger, and then maybe there's people out there that you can help with this. I'm giving you this tool to help them. And, I feel like God's laid this message on me, and I feel like He's asked me to present it this way. And I talk about this every chance I get. And so I'm asking that you consider, helping spread this word. If once again, you don't want to, it's between you and God. I'm not going to say, hey, so and so didn't share this. I don't think I know who shares. I think it just says it's shared. I don't really know who shares because it's YouTube is hard to tell that way. But anyway, so once again, thank you for all of you who have been there. I hope that you're getting help from this one. This one's going to be a little odd today because some of you may have never heard of some of this stuff. But typically this time of year, like I've said before, coming up on Easter, you get those National Geographic, you get those History Channel things, you get Discovery Show, all those shows that say, did Jesus really exist? And they always bring in these people because there's a movie called Zeitgeist that came out years ago, and then there's Bill Maher did Religulous, and there's been some others where they say that Jesus Christ is just a copy of ancient mythology, ancient religions, and that therefore it can't be trusted. Well, if you want to say, sure, it looks like there's some similarities, then does that suggest that it can't be trusted? That's your first question, okay? So, and then also, is this just mythology? So let me talk about the mythology for a second. You got to look at, when you're studying the Bible, you got to look at literary style, okay? In this part of the Bible, now the Bible does have poetry, it has prophecy, it has other things, but in this point, it is history. These people were recording, documenting events that they saw and were a part of. And this is evidence, literary style can be evidence of that sort of thing. I'm moving a chair because I want to prop my foot up here. Literary style can be evidence that you can use to determine how something was written, the purpose behind something written. For instance, in Luke chapter 3, verse 1, it starts out, I'm going to try to in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, when Herod was the tetrarch of Galilee, they're saying specific people that are historical to give a time frame of when something happened. Also, there are references to locations and actual places, cities and places within the city, the Pool of Siloam, the Pool of Bethesda, all of those kind of things have been found with archaeologists. I will promise you, I will have trouble saying that word for the rest of my life. They have been. Here you go. Ready? Those things have been archaeologically proven to exist, and they're referencing exact things. Whereas mythology comes across as more of a once upon a time kind of style of writing. I'm not saying it's fairy tale, but it's still come across as fiction. Okay, so when it's written fictionary style, it's like Zeus one day came down and saw a maiden by the pond, and he wanted her, and that sort of thing. It's not saying, during the reign of blah, 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 on the month of something, all this. It's just a story. And now don't hear me ragging on mythology. I love mythology. If you've been to my house, I have almost as many books on mythology as I do on God. I have Chinese, Japanese, Aztec, Mayan, Native American, of course, the typical Greek and Roman and Norse. I've got African. I've got mythology. I've got books on. I don't think there's mythology left. I don't have a book on it. I love mythology. They're great stories. They're fun to read. However, they're not fun to worship, or they're not right to worship, I should say. So when you say, Jesus is just mythology, you have to look at that first. So, and then the next thing is this. Just because something has similarities doesn't mean anything. One thing is this. If you write enough stories, and there's a lot of mythology, if you write enough stories, you're eventually going to find somebody in reality that sounds like those stories. That's just a fact. You write enough things, eventually somebody's going to sound like some of this. Hard to find somebody who sounds exactly like all of this, but you might be able to cherry pick this piece and this piece, which is exactly what they've done in the movies like Guys and other things like that. And there's tons of YouTube videos on this topic where it goes in way more detail. I'm not going to today. I'm just hit some of their highlights because I just feel like it's sort of low-hanging fruit to argue this every single time because it's so obvious that it's a falsehood. It's so obvious it's twisted, manipulated to try to sound like Jesus never really existed. You shouldn't worship him. But you got to kind of question a motive of somebody when they can be proven so wrong and yet still hold to it. And I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. But here's an example of something written that seems a little weird. I'm going to tell you about a story. It was a ship, a large ship. The largest ever made, fast ship, the fast of its kind today. Because it was so big and so solid, it was called unsinkable. Because it's unsinkable, they didn't have enough lifeboats on the ship. They loaded it up with people. They were heading from Europe to America, and on its way in high speed, it hit an iceberg, sunk, killing thousands of people. Now, is that a story you sound like you've heard before? Well, it was written in 1898 in a novel called Futility. And the ship is called the Titan. Not Titanic, Titan. It was written by a guy named Morgan Robertson. Now, in 1912, when the Titanic actually did sink, people came in and said, "Are you clairvoyant? How did you do this?" And he says, "No, read the story. You're just picking out the little pieces that sound the same, but you read the story." He said, "The thing is, I know shipbuilding. I know maritime existence. And you guys kept building them bigger. You kept making them faster. And the only thing out in the open seas that's really any danger is icebergs. So I just wrote a story about something that I was seeing was going to happen eventually." So he wasn't really saying, but one could look at his book and following the logic we've seen in these other things to say the Titanic never really happened because it just copied this. Now, if you read Futility, like I said, it's not like the Titanic at all. Leonardo DiCaprio's not in front going, "I'm the king of the world." That didn't happen. And he got to stay on the table instead of letting him sink. He was able to say, "No, that's not true. That didn't happen in the book at all." I hate that about Titanic, that she let him sink. There was room on the table. Anyway, it's a different story. But see how if you take the story and look how close that was. It's very much more similar than these other stories. And this is where we get to the fun part. We get to the fun part of what they call similar and what is actuality. And we're going to hit their poster child first. Anytime anybody talks about ancient religions that Jesus copied, they're going to go to Mithras first. You may have never heard of Mithras, but I'm going to tell you, you will if you listen to some of the stuff upcoming. Or you're listening to anybody that talks about what they call a mythicist. Anybody that says Jesus was a myth, they call themselves mythicists. Or somebody calls them mythicists. I don't know where that's the label for them. But Mithras was a Persian god, but he's also Vedic. He was also Roman. But Persian was when he was, like a 1,000, maybe 1,500 years before Jesus. So you go, see, this was before Jesus. So Jesus must have copied him. Well, the issue is most of the writings about Mithras didn't happen until the 2nd century. After Roman soldiers, having gone out and been encamped in wherever they were stationed for years, came back with this worship of this religion from Persia and made it part of the Roman culture. And so for a brief period, Mithraic worship was happening there in Rome. and then the writing started happening then. The only references to some of the comparisons are mostly stone carvings and murals. For example, he is said to have been born of a virgin, just like Jesus. Well, the only birth comparison they have is carvings, and this was a statue they carved several times, but carvings of him as a full-grown man coming up out of a rock. He's like bringing himself up out of a rock. And he's like, one time he's got a sword, sometimes he's got a sword, sometimes he doesn't. He's always wearing a hat for some reason. I'm not sure what it is with a hat. But being born out of a rock is not the same thing as being born of a virgin. You can say, well, see, the virgin, he didn't have a father, so he was clearly born of a virgin. Well, if you're stretching it that far, you're stretching it too far. That's cool. That's silly. Mitra is the word for son in Persian. So when he gets to Rome, they associate with him the soul of Invictus, which was a sun god basically worshipped in Rome at the time. That's where we get December 25th from. So they say, see, he was born on December 25th, just like Jesus. Well, there is no real record of when he was born. They just reference that they put that worship on Sol Invictus because they associated Mitra, meaning sun, with Sol Invictus, who is the sun god. There's no really, but that's just when later on the church wanted to do away with any pagan religion on December 25th, so they put Jesus' birthday there. They say, hey, this is when he's born. So, we don't really know exactly when Jesus was born. Most people do not put it in December at all. However, he was also said to have 12 disciples. Here's where the 12 disciples came from. There's a mural of him standing and surrounded by the personages of the 12 signs of the zodiac. And so they say, see, he had 12. We didn't have 12 followers. He just was represented by the zodiac. He was part of that religion and that belief system. And so that's not the same thing as having 12 disciples that follows you and helped spread your word and teach your word. There's no record of him dying. He most certainly never died for people. The only shedding of blood was he killed a bull. Supposedly it was the primeval bull. It was a primordial bull. It was the bull of existence, and he killed it and shed its blood. And there's an inscription in Rome from the 2nd century where they say, you spilled the eternal blood for us. Okay, but once again, 2nd century after Jesus, and that's not really the same thing as dying on a cross. There is no reference actually of Mithras dying. He supposedly just rode away into the sky on a chariot with Sol Invictus. Not the same thing. So that's their poster child on that one. The next big one you always hear about is Horus, because Horus is in Egyptian mythology, and that's clearly before Jesus. Once again, supposedly born of a virgin. Isis is his mother. Isis was married to Osiris, which consequently he also is considered a comparison to Jesus as well. We're going to talk about him in just a second. But coincidentally, I said consequently, sorry. I hate it when I use words out of context. Coincidentally, he's also that as well. But here, let's talk about Isis first off. Virgin born. Once she'd been married to Osiris for some time. There is, once again, no writings. It's hieroglyphic carvings. It's the pictures, the images that you see in Egypt. Everybody knows about hieroglyphics and pictures and carved in the stone. There's no like writing. That doesn't happen once again till the 2nd century. Remember, Jesus was 1st century, 2nd century. But here, let's talk with Isis being virgin. Now, Osiris was killed by his brother, cut into a bunch of pieces, scattered all over the planet. Isis went and gathered all the pieces together. And some stories say she gathered all the pieces, and some stories say she missed that one piece that you need to have a kid. I'm trying to make this as family-friendly as possible. She couldn't find that piece in one story, and she made one for him. But here's the thing, and this is the part I got to be delicate how I say this. The carvings that they say that, see, she's virgin, is she had turned herself into a falcon. She's hovering over, and you can Google this, she's hovering over the body of Osiris, who is laying face up. And how do I delicately put this? Clearly in the mood for activity. It is visually seen that he is there, and happy. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be careful. I don't want to offend anybody at all by this, but I just want to make it clear that they're saying because she's hovering there and not actually connected, that means she's a virgin because there's no connection there. Now, I think that's a little ludicrous to say, and I have discovered that my word is ludicrous. So we're gonna start having like a game where we keep marks of how many times I say ludicrous in one of these videos. But it's a little moronic to say that means that, because here's the thing: I've got a kid. Many of you people have a kid. There's no stone carvings of me making that kid. That doesn't mean that I didn't make the kid the old-fashioned way. So it's a little much to say, see, that she's hovering. That's proof that she never did. That's not. And that's a stretch. Way stretch. Sorry. Once again, they say he was born on the 25th of December, just like Jesus. Well, that's not true. They put his birth between October and November, an Egyptian month of I can't pronounce the word. I didn't write it down. But not December 25th. They also say he was baptized by a guy named Anup the Baptizer. I have not heard of or seen of or read of any Egyptologist who even knows who Anup the Baptizer is, or even finds any reference in ancient Egypt of a baptizer who baptized Horus. They say he walked on water. They say he was the Son of God. And they say that he died and rose again. And let's tell you why they say those things. Because when called on the carpet, especially about the walking on water thing, this was the answer. Well, he's referenced with the sun god. And the sun, if you notice, reflects on the surface of the water, basically walking on the water. So that's the same thing. That's not the same thing. That's not the same thing. I have trouble reading some of these and laughing. I'm not laughing. You've seen me do this before, and I try not to laugh. I'm not mocking. It just seems silly. I guess maybe I am. I don't mean to mock, but it's just funny to me that they can stretch it that far and not go. Maybe we're stretching it too far. Here's the other thing. He was called the Son of God. See, and Son. He's the Son of God because he's with the Son God basically, and so he's the Son of God, and then Jesus was the Son of God, S-O-N-S-U-N. The problem is that only works in English, not Egyptian. The word Son as a child and Son as in the sky are not pronounced the same way and just spelled differently in Egyptian, because Egyptian was hieroglyphics and the sound we don't even know for sure. But there's no reason to believe that because it sounds that way in English that it means the same thing in Egyptian. It doesn't mean that same way in during the 2nd century either, when most of the stuff was written down. So it's a little bit of a stretch. So I'm going to move some papers over because I've got a lot of details and I really wanted to cover all those. Now we did mention Osiris, once again, the father of Horus, but also another supposedly died and rising again God. He's called the Good Shepherd, supposedly, just like Jesus. Well, their only reference to him being a shepherd is seen a lot in Egyptian hieroglyphics, is pharaohs and rulers you always see them with their arms crossed and their head turned, and they're holding a shepherd's crook. That was a symbol in Egyptology of a ruler. That was not a symbol of good shepherd. They held staffs and one of the things is a shepherd's crook. I'm not sure why a shepherd's crook, but to say because he's holding this, it means he was called the Good Shepherd. That doesn't mean he was called that at all. It just means that's what they did, and that is what they did. Osiris is not the only one seen holding a shepherd's crook in Egypt, Egyptian history. He never resurrected. When Isis put his body back together after creating Horus, he went to the underworld to rule there. He didn't walk around and still be a person like he was before. He didn't say, "Hi, everybody, I'm Osiris. Remember me getting killed? I'm back." He went into a spirit world, the underworld, basically, to rule there. So, once again, not the same thing as dying and rising again. I'm going to try to hurry up this, get rid of this finish because I got a couple more I want to hit. Dionysus, so we can get out of the Egyptian stuff. Dionysus from Greek mythology. Couple of different stories. Zeus, one, there's no reference to him on the date of when he was born. They say he was born on December 25th as well. There's no reference anywhere of dates in Greek mythology. But Zeus supposedly comes down and sees, and there's two different stories. He sees Persephone or he sees some other maiden. I've forgotten her name. But he sees them and he's like, one of them, he hits them with a lightning bolt because that's his way of whatever. And another one, he does his thing because Zeus was well known for being a womanizer. And she gets pregnant with Dionysus. Hera, Zeus's wife, who I don't understand why she constantly put up with him trapping around, but she did the same stuff sometimes. That was common in Greek mythology. But she gets angry, kills the mother. And to save the baby, Zeus takes the baby out of the womb, cuts open his own thigh, sews it into his thigh. This is my thigh here in case you're wondering. Until the baby develops enough to be born. Now, my high school biology class didn't say that's how babies are developed. But if you want to say, but it was a miracle, he's a God. Okay, then I'll accept miracles. If you're willing to accept that miracles exist, then I'll call it a miracle. Because, okay, so he miraculously developed the child in his thigh. But that's not the same thing as a virgin birth. Okay? They call it a virgin birth. That's not the same thing as virgin birth. Zeus, clearly in the stories, was having intimate time with these people often throughout Greek mythology. These women were not virgins like Mary. And you also have to look at how it just screams legend and screams mythology, not history. Even the reference of Jesus being born, it talks about when he was born, who was the ruler, what was going on, all these kind of things, so that you see its historical writing. I'm going to try to cover this quickly. Supposedly he turned water into wine, because Dionysus was the god of wine. Okay, he was god of wine, so you'd expect the god of wine to do things like that. There's no reference to him actually turning water into wine, though. He just made wine. If you want to be specific, I want to be specific here. But once again, this was not written until 2nd century. So that's an issue there, too. The closest thing to him dying and rising again is he was, as a child, he was eaten by a titan, and Zeus got the heart away from them before they ate the heart, and he recreated Dionysus from the heart, if you want to call that dying and rising. As a child, he didn't really, same thing. But once again, these are stories of gods. They're supposed to be able to do miraculous things. There is an image of Dionysus riding into town on a mule, and the people are doing palm leaves in front of him and everything. So they say, see, Jesus did that. Well, the issue is this. Jesus wasn't necessarily copying Dionysus when he did that. He was copying all rulers, because that's how they welcomed rulers in. When rulers went out and fought a war, and when they were returning victorious, they rode in on a donkey, and the people threw the palm leaves at their feet as they rode in. Lots of rulers had done that. So Dionysus copied them, or they copied Dionysus. I don't care. But Jesus was copying riding in as a king coming into town anyway. So he wasn't copying Dionysus. He was saying, I'm king just like all those other guys. So it's not the same thing. Last one I will hit is Buddha. They say Buddha was born a virgin. There's no reference of that. Most writings of Buddha are after the 2nd century as well. No scholars find any evidence of a virgin birth for Buddha. He never claimed that. There seems to be no claim of that. I'm not sure where people are getting this from. There is no mention of a baptism. There's no mention of a cross. There's no mention of a tomb in any wise sayings. Yes, Siddhartha Gautama Buddha wrote some wise stuff, or had some wise teachings that was written down. If he said these things that they wrote down, very, very wise things, but never claimed that he was going to die and rise again. There is one story of supposedly he opened his coffin and came out and said something and then closed the coffin back up. But that's just one story that's written, once again, well after the 2nd century. And he also never claimed he was going to return. See, the belief is that there will be another who will take the point or the position of Buddha, of the great Buddha, just like he did. Just like Siddhartha Gautama Buddha was the Buddha of that time, it is believed that there will be another Buddha coming each time. Each generation will have its Buddha, basically, is the mindset there. But not that Siddhartha Gautama Buddha will come back. It's just that there will be another one that takes the place of Buddha. So not the same thing as saying that the Buddha will die and the Buddha will be again. or the title will be, but we'll have presidents die and another president will come in. That's not the same thing. So you have to look at when people are stretching these things so far that they got to stretch them to go believe this way. Why are they so desperate to not believe? My question is of you. If you've wondered, why are you so desperate to not believe God that you're willing to believe these things and say he was born of a virgin, he died and rose again, all these things, when these stories are nothing like Jesus at all? And that's just a few of them. There are hundreds, really, it seems to be. But you can stretch, like I said, anything. If you cherry pick enough details, you can tell any story you want. But here's my last thing. Who's to say that God didn't give visions to all of humanity to announce his imminent arrival as Jesus? And they took these visions and wrote whatever stories they wrote. We don't know. That's not what happened. We don't know. What we do know is Jesus Christ lived. This is not a story of mythology written. This is historical. Jesus lived. Jesus was crucified, died on a cross, historical, buried in a tomb, historical, and the tomb was empty 3 days later, historical. Not mythology, not belief, not hoping, wishing, belief because of historical document, not in the Bible. Now, the Bible historical document as well, and I challenge anybody to say it's not, but I have, in my previous videos, showed you 12 different guys. I have done more study. I didn't really reference them then, and I meant to say this in that other video, but I found over 150 documents from the 1st and 2nd century that reference Christians, Christ, the cross, an empty tomb in some form or fashion. They just didn't get all put in the Bible because they were just, some were just historical documents, some of them were gospels that were contradictory to the entire Bible anyway, so they were left out, but they still referenced it. So there's plenty there. And I'm sorry this one ran so long. I really didn't mean for it to. I hope that doesn't keep some of you from watching it or sharing. Please do. We're going to be done here now. If I don't, you guys will most certainly say, you are a wicked man. See you next time.